Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Gentleman Psychic. First of all, I have to do those little tricks that I do. I have to go on here, find my live video, and then share it on the medias of social. Let me see. Where am I? Come on now. I don't know why I can never find when I am live. It just takes, here we go, part 4, 3 watching, which is good. Hello, everybody. We have to share, copy this. And then over here, join me live for 20,000 leagues under the sea. And then I have to do it one more time. I don't know why I'm not seeing the chats yet. Let's see. I don't know why I'm not seeing the chats. I see 3 people watching, so that's good. I'm going to go over here to my other, paste that here. Join me live for 20,000 leagues under the sea. Now, we published that one. And oh, good. Isaac is here. Hello. Good to see you, Isaac. Hello, everybody. I am so excited for today. Hello, Richard Goulet. Good to see you. I do very well, thank you. I have had quite an uneventfully eventful day, and I want to tell you a little bit about that, but I want people to sort of get a moment to come in and relax and have just a moment of peace before we go into 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I actually want to tell you something kind of funny. The first thing I want to tell you, so happy Pride Month, by the way. Happy Pride Month. It is upon us. It is here. We're halfway through. We're over halfway through, but happy Pride. And also, because it is Pride Month, I wanted to read to you something that I found on the interwebs. So where is this? Oh, I took a picture of it because I thought it was so funny. So there's this Christian gentleman who has decided that he wants to reclaim the rainbow. And he has this couple. This is not the person who posted it, but this couple is wearing his shirt. And it says, "Make the rainbow godly again." And he's on this sort of campaign to make things less friendly to certain members of society. So I responded with this. I said, "Is that shirt 100% cotton? I hope it's not a blended fabric, because you are breaking the Leviticus law if it isn't. Also, I hope they come in male and female versions to prevent the error of a woman putting on that which pertains to a man. How about that haircut and beard? The Bible clearly forbids trimming of the beard and rounding the corners of your hair. And you are wearing glasses on your shirt. I hope they are only for decoration and never worn on the face. Those things aren't natural, and God doesn't want people to do unnatural things. He created you blind, and you are just not believing hard enough. And I surely hope that neither of you were married previously, unless she was your dead brother's wife. It does appear she is wearing makeup, which goes against the law of God and women being shamefaced. As concerned Christians, please make certain that you have removed the beam out of your eye before removing the splinter out of your brother's eye. So, haha, showing them more Bible verses. And I left it with this dancing rainbow fellow, which I thought was quite clever. And then this woman decided that she had to respond. And she says to me, "We live in the New Testament times, not Old Testament times. So all that doesn't matter." And I responded, "No, your Jesus said, 'Not a jot or tittle shall pass from the law.' And might I remind you that your rainbow origin fairy tale and the clobber passages are Old Testament." And then I said a few choice words and then told her what to do with her Bible. That's what I told her. I won't say it on YouTube because they will demonetize me, but that was something that amused me. And what I wanted to talk about really for just a split second while we're letting people come in, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Jesus, not a Christian, I'm not a Christian, but Jesus said that not a jot or tittle shall pass from the law, and think not that I am come to destroy the law. I am not come to destroy it, but to fulfill it. So these people who claim to be in the New Testament times, they also decide which Old Testament verses to live by. And the not eating pork thing, they don't mind that. They'll eat pork, they'll cut their hair, they'll wear mixed fibers, but they'll cherry pick these things and say, "Oh, but this is still relevant." So anyway, that was one funny thing that happened today. Hi, Mary Jane. Hi, Sam. Hi, Richard Goulet. Hi, Isaac. I wanted to tell you another funny thing that happened to me today. So I went to grab my dinner. Tomorrow is a car show, and I was readying Mr. Satan for a car show because I thought it would be fun. So I gave him a bath and I waxed him and I cleaned out, I vacuumed. I mean, it was several hours worth of work. I mean, how often does one spend waxing their rod, as the case were. So I cleaned up my car and I went through the drive-through for dinner, which I know it's late and I'm not supposed to, but I did. And I go through the drive-through and there was this homeless man who had walked down the side and then walked through the drive-through as I was sitting there, with Mr. Satan. There's no windows, there's no top, it's a little car. And he starts saying, "Oh, what a beautiful car. Oh, I'm going to take a picture. Oh, beautiful car. I sure wish my daddy was rich. I sure wish my daddy bought me a nice car." And I had to laugh because I bought that car and I worked my rear end off for it. And he gives me hell, my car, Mr. Satan, and I still love him and I drive him. And that's why I wanted to say he has no idea. But anyway, enough of that, enough of the sort of chit chat. And I have worked very hard. At any rate, my lovelies, it is time that we turn our attention to this week's story, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Chapter 11. Some Figures. A moment after we were seated on the divan, in the saloon smoking, the captain showed me a sketch that gave the plan, section, and elevation of the Nautilus. Then he began his description in these words. "Here, Monsieur Arnaud, are several dimensions of the boat you're in. It is an elongated cylinder with a canonical ends. It's very like a cigar in shape, a shape already adopted in London in several constructions of the same sort. The length of this cylinder, from stem to stern, is exactly 232 feet, and its maximum breadth is 26 feet. It is not built quite like your long voyage steamers, but its lines are sufficiently long, and its curves prolonged enough to allow the water to slide off easily, and oppose, not obstacle, to its passage. These two dimensions enable you to obtain by a simple calculation the surface and cubic contents of the Nautilus. Its area measures 6,032 feet, and its contents about 1,500 cubic yards, and is to say, when completely immersed, it displaces 50,000 feet of water, or weighs 1,500 tons. When I made the plans for this submarine vessel, I meant that 9/10 should be submerged. Consequently, it ought only to displace 9/10 of its bulk. That is to say, only to weigh that number of tons. I ought not, therefore, to have exceeded that weight constructing it on the aforesaid dimensions. The Nautilus is composed of two hulls, one inside, the other outside, joined by T-shaped irons which render it very strong. Indeed, owing to its cellular arrangement, it resists like a block, as if it were solid. Its sides cannot yield. It coerces spontaneously, and not by the closeness of its rivets and the homogeneity of its construction, due to the perfect union of the materials, enables it to defy the roughest seas. These two hulls are composed of steel plates whose density is from 0.07 to 0.08 that of water. The first is not less than 2.5 inches thick and weighs 394 tons. The second envelope, the keel, 20 inches high and 10 thick, weighs alone 62 tons. The engine, the ballast, the several accessories and apparatus appendages, the partitions, the bulkheads, weigh 961.62 tons. Do you follow all this? Then, when the Nautilus is afloat under these circumstances, 1/10 is out of the water. Now, if I have made reservoirs of size equal to the 10th, or capable of holding 150 tons, and if I fill them with water, the boat, weighing then 1,507 tons, will be completely immersed. That would happen, Professor. These reservoirs are in the lower parts of the Nautilus. I turn on the taps, and they fill, and the vessel sinks, and had just been level with the surface. Well, Captain, but not now we come to the real difficulty. I can understand your rising to the surface, but diving below the surface does not your submarine contrivance encounter a pressure and consequently undergo an upward thrust of 1 atmosphere for every 30 feet of water, just about 15 pounds per square inch? Just so, sir. Then unless you quite fill the Nautilus, I do not see how you can draw it down to those depths. Professor, you must not confound statistics with dynamics, or you will be exposed to grave errors. There is very little labor spent in attaining the lower regions of the ocean, for all bodies have a tendency to sink. When I wanted to find out the necessary increase of weight required to sink the Nautilus, I had only to calculate the reduction of volume that seawater acquires according to the depth. That is evident. Now, if water is not absolutely incomprehensible, it is at least capable of very slight compression. Indeed, after the most recent calculations, this reduction is only 0.000436 of an atmosphere for each 30 feet of depth. If we want to sink 3,000 feet, I should keep account of the reduction of bulk under the pressure equal to the column of water of 1,000 feet. The calculation is easily verified. Now I have supplementary reservoirs capable of holding 100 tons. Therefore, I can sink to a considerable depth. When I wish to rise to the level of this sea, I only let off the water and empty all the reservoirs if I want the Nautilus to emerge from the 10th part of her total capacity. I had nothing to object to these reasonings. I admit your calculations, Captain, I replied. I should be wrong to dispute them, since daily experience confirms them, but I foresee a real difficulty in the way. What, sir? When you are about 1,000 feet deep, the walls of the Nautilus bear a pressure of 100 atmospheres. If then, just now, you were to empty supplementary reservoirs to lighten the vessel and to go up to the surface, the pumps must overcome the pressure of 100 atmospheres, which is 1,500 pounds per square inch. From that power, the electricity alone can give, said the captain hastily. I repeat, sir, that the dynamic power of the engines is almost infinite. The pumps of the Nautilus. The pumps of the Nautilus have an enormous power, as you must have observed, when their jets of water burst like a torrent upon the Abraham Lincoln. Besides, if I use subsidiary reservoirs only to attain a mean depth of 750 to 1,000 fathoms, and that with a view of managing my machines, also, when I have a mind to visit the depths of the ocean 5 or 6 miles below the surface, I make use of slower but not less infallible means. What are they, Captain? That involves my telling you how the Nautilus is worked. I am impatient to learn. To steer this boat, to starboard or port, turn, in a word, following a horizontal path, I use an ordinary rudder fixed on the back of the stern post with one wheel and some tackle to steer by. But I can also make the Nautilus rise and sink and rise by vertical movement by means of 2 inclined planes fastened to its sides, opposite the center of flotation. Planes that move in every direction and that are worked by powerful levers from the interior. If the planes are kept parallel with the boat, it moves horizontally. If slanted, the Nautilus, according to this inclination, and under the influence of the screw, either sinks diagonally or rises diagonally as it suits me. And even if I wish to rise more quickly to the surface, I ship the screw, and the pressure of the water causes the Nautilus to rise vertically, like a balloon filled with hydrogen. Bravo, Captain! But how can the steersman follow en route in the middle of the waters? The steersman is placed in a glazed box that is raised above the hull of the Nautilus and furnished with lenses. Are these lenses capable of resisting such pressure? Perfectly. Glass which breaks at a blow is nevertheless capable of offering considerable resistance. During some experiments of fishing by electric light in 1864 in the northern seas, we saw plates less than 1/3 of an inch thick resist a pressure of 16 atmospheres. Now the glass that I use is not less than 30 times thicker. Granted, but after all, in order to see, the light must exceed the darkness, and in the midst of the darkness, in the water, how can you see? Behind the steersman cage is placed a powerful electric reflector, the rays from which light up the sea for half a mile in front. Ah, bravo, bravo, Captain. Now I can account for this atmospherence in supposed narwhal that puzzled us so. I now ask you if the boarding of the Nautilus and of the Scotia and has made such noise has been the result of a chance of a rencontre. Quite accidental, sir. I was sailing only 1 fathom below the surface of the water when the shock came. It had no bad result. None, sir. But now about your rencontre with the Abraham Lincoln. Professor, I am sorry for one of the best vessels in the American Navy, but they attacked me, and I was bound to defend myself. I contented myself, however, with putting the frigate hors de combat. She will not have any difficulty in getting repaired at the next port. Ah, Commander, your Nautilus is certainly a marvelous boat. Yes, Professor, and I love it as if it were part of myself. If danger threatens one of your vessels on the ocean, the first impression is the feeling of an abyss above and below. On the Nautilus, men's hearts never fail them. No defects to be afraid of. For the double shell is as firm as iron, no rigging to attend to, no sails for the wind to carry away, no boilers to burst, no fire to fear. For the vessel is made of iron, not wood, no coal to run short, for electricity is the only mechanical agent, no collision to fear, for it alone swims in the deep water, no tempest to brave, for when it dives below the water it reaches absolute tranquility. There, sir, that is the perfection of vessels. And if that it is true that the engineer has more confidence in the vessel than the builder, and the builder than the captain himself, you understand the trust I repose in my Nautilus, for I am at once captain, builder, and engineer. But how could you construct this wonderful Nautilus in secret? Each separate portion, Monsieur Arnaud, was brought from different parts of the globe. The keel was forged at Crushot. The shaft of the screw of Penn and Company's London, the iron plates of the hull at Laird's of Liverpool, the screw itself at Scott's at Glasgow. The reservoirs were made by Cale and Company at Paris, the engine by Krupp in Prussia, its beak in Malta's workshop, in Sweden, its mathematical instructions by Hart Brothers of New York, etc. And each of these people had my orders under different names. But these parts had to be put together and arranged. Professor, I had set up my workshops upon a desert island in the ocean. There my workmen, that is to say, the brave men that I instructed and educated and myself, have put together our Nautilus. Then, when the work was finished, fire destroyed all trace of our proceedings. This island, that I could have jumped over if I liked. Then the cost of this vessel is great. Monsieur Arnaud, an iron vessel costs £45 per ton. Now the Nautilus weighed 1,500. It came therefore to £67,500 and £80,000 more for fitting it up, and about £200,000 with the work of art and the collections it contains. One last question, Captain Nemo. Ask it, Professor. Are you rich? Immensely rich, sir. And I could, without missing it, pay the national debt of France. I started at the singular person who spoke thus. I stared at the singular person who spoke thus. Was he playing upon my credulity? The future would decide. I'm sorry, that was chapter 12, chapter 13. Chapter 13, The Black River. The portion of the terrestrial globe which is covered by water is estimated at upward of 80 millions of acres. This fluid mass comprises 2,250,000,000 of cubic miles, forming the spherical body of a diameter of 60 leagues, the weight of which would be 3 quintillions of tons. To comprehend the meaning of these figures, it is necessary to observe that a quintillion is to a billion as a billion is to unity. In other words, there are as many billions in a quintillion as there are units in a billion. This mass of fluid is equal to about the quantity of water which would be discharged by all the rivers of earth in 40,000 years. During the geological epochs, the Igneous period succeeded to the Aqueous. The ocean originally prevailed everywhere. Then, by degree, in the Silurian period, the tops of the mountains began to appear. The islands emerged, then disappeared in partial deluges, reappeared, became settled, formed continents, till at length the earth became geographically arranged, as we see in the present day. The solid had wrested from the liquid 37,657,000 square miles, equal to 12,960,000,000 of acres. The shape of the continents allows us to divide the waters into 5 great portions: the Arctic, or frozen ocean, the Antarctic, or frozen ocean, the Indian, the Atlantic, and the Pacific Oceans. The Pacific Ocean extends from north to south between the 2 polar circles, and from east to west between Asia and America. Over an extent of 145 degrees of longitude, it is the quietest of seas. Its currents are broad and slow. It has medium tides and abundant rain. Such was the ocean that my fate destined me first to travel over under these strange conditions. "Sir," said Captain Nemo, "we will, if you please, take our bearings and fix the starting point of this voyage. It is 11:45. I will go up again to the surface." The captain pressed an electric clock 3 times. The pumps began to drive the water from the tanks. The needle of the manometer marked by a different pressure the ascent of the Nautilus. Then it stopped. "We have arrived," said the captain. I went to the central staircase, which opened to the platform, clambered up the iron steps, and found myself on the upper part of the Nautilus. The platform was only 3 feet out of water. The front and back of the Nautilus was of that of spindle shape, which caused it to justly to be compared to a cigar. I noticed that its iron plates, slightly overlaying each other, resembled the shell which clothes the bodies of our large terrestrial reptiles. It explained to me how natural it was, in spite of the glasses, that this boat should have been taken for a marine animal. Toward the middle of the platform of the longboat, half buried in the hull of the vessel, formed the slight exercents. Fore and aft, 2 cages of medium height, with inclined sides and partly closed by thick lenticular glasses, one destined for the steersman who directed the Nautilus, the other containing a brilliant lantern to give light on the road. The sea was beautiful. The sky was pure. Scarcely could the long vehicle feel the broad undulations of the ocean. A light breeze from the east rippled the surface of the waters. The horizon, free from fog, made observations easy. Nothing was in sight. Not a quicksand, not an island, a vast desert. Captain Nemo, by the help of his sextant, took the altitude of the sun, which ought to also to give the latitude. He waited for some moments till its disk touched the horizon. While taking observations, not a muscle moved. The instrument could not have been more motionless in a hand of marble. "12:00, sir," said he, "when you like." I cast a last look upon the sea, slightly yellowed by the Japanese coast, and descended to the saloon. "And now, sir, I leave you to your studies," added the captain. "Our course is ENE. Our depth is 26 fathoms. Here are maps on large scale by which you may follow. The saloon is at your disposal. And with your permission, I will retire." Captain Nemo bowed. I remained alone, lost in thoughts all bearing on commander of the Nautilus. For a whole hour was I deep in these reflections, seeking to pierce this mystery so interesting to me. Then my eyes fell upon the vast plane sphere spread upon the table, and I placed my finger on the very spot where the given latitude and longitude crossed. The sea has its large rivers like the continents. They are special currents known by their temperature and their color. The most remarkable of these is known by the name of the Gulf Stream. Science has decided on the globe the direction of 5 principal currents: one in the northern Atlantic, a second in the south, a third in the North Pacific, a fourth in the south, and a fifth in the southern Indian Ocean. It is even probable that the 6th current existed at one time or another in the northern Indian Ocean, when the captain and Aral seas formed Caspian and Aral seas formed but one vast sheet of water. At this point, indicated on the planisphere, one of these currents was rolling. The Kuro Sovio of the Japanese, the Black River, which, leaving the Gulf of Bengal, where it is warmed by the perpendicular rays of tropical sun, crosses the Straits of Malacca along the coast of Asia, turns into the North Pacific to the Altunian Islands, carrying with it trunks of camphor trees and other indigenous productions, and edging the waves of the ocean with pure indigo of its warm water. It was this current that the Nautilus was to follow. I followed it with my eye, saw it lose itself in the vastness of the Pacific, and felt myself drawn with it when Ned Land and Council appeared at the door of the saloon. My two brave companions remained petrified at the sight of the wonders spread before them. "Where are we? Where are we?" exclaimed the Canadian. "In the museum at Quebec?" "My friends," I answered, making a sign to them to enter, "you are not in Canada, but on board the Nautilus, 50 yards below the level of sea." "But Monsieur Arnaud," said Ned Land, "can you tell me how many men there are on board? 10, 20, 50, 100? "I cannot answer you, Mr. Land. It is better to abandon for a time all idea of seizing the Nautilus or escaping from it. The ship is a masterpiece of modern industry, and I should be sorry not to have seen it. Many people would accept this situation forced upon us, if only to move among such wonders. So be quiet, and let us try and use what passes around us." "See," exclaimed the harpooner, "but we can see nothing in this iron prison. We are walking, we are sailing blindly." Ned Land had scarcely pronounced these words when all was suddenly dark. The luminous ceiling was gone, and so rapidly that my eyes received a painful impression. We remained mute, not stirring, and not knowing what surprise awaited us, whether agreeable or disagreeable. A sliding noise was heard. One would have said that panels were working at the sides of the Nautilus. "It is the end of the end," said Ned Land. Suddenly, light broke at each side of the saloon. Through two oblong openings, the liquid mass appeared vividly, lit up by electric gleam. Two crystal plates separated us from the sea. At first, I trembled at the thought that this frail partition might break, but strong bands of copper bound them, giving an almost infinite power of resistance. The sea was distinctly visible for a mile all around the Nautilus. What a spectacle! What pen can describe it? Who could paint the effects of the light through those transparent sheets of water, and the softness of the successive graduations from the lower to the superior strata of the ocean? We know the transparency of the sea, and that its clearness is far beyond that of rock water. The mineral and organic substances which it holds in suspension heighten its transparency. In certain parts of the ocean, at the Antilles, under 27 fathoms of water, can be seen with surprising clearness a bed of sand. The penetrating power of the solar rays does not seem to cause for depth of 150 fathoms. But in the middle of this fluid traveled over the Nautilus, the electric brightness was produced even in the bosom of the waves. It was no longer luminous water, but liquid light. On each side, a window opened into this unexplored abyss. The obscurity of the saloon showed to advantage the brightness outside, and we looked out of this pure crystal and had been the glass of an immense aquarium. "You wish to see, friend Ned? Well, you see now." "Curious, curious," muttered the Canadian, who, forgetting his ill temper, seemed to submit to some irresistible attraction. "And one would come further than this to admire such a sight. Ah, thought I to myself, I understand the life of this man. He has made a world apart for himself, in which he treasures all his greatest wonders. For 2 whole hours, an aquatic army escorted the Nautilus. During their games, their bounds, while rivaling each other in beauty, brightness, and velocity, I distinguished the green labor, the banded mullet, marked by a double line of black, the round-tailed goby of a white color, the violet spots of the back, the Japanese scombrus, a beautiful mackerel of the seas, with a blue body and a silvery head, the brilliant azures, whose name alone defies description, some banded spares, with variegated fins of blue and yellow, some alcatones and woodcocks of the seas, some specimens of which attain a yard in length, Japanese salamanders, spider lampreys, serpents 6 feet long, with eyes small and lively, and huge mouth bristling with teeth, with many other species. Our imagination was kept at its height. Interjections followed quickly on each other. Ned named the fish, and Council classed them. I was in ecstasies with the vivacity of their movements and the beauty of their forms. Never had it been given to me to surprise these animals alive, at liberty in their natural element. I will not mention all the varieties which passed before my dazzled eyes, all the collection of the seas of China and Japan. These fish, more numerous than the birds of the air, came, attracted no doubt by the brilliant focus of the electric light. Suddenly there was daylight in the saloon. The iron panels closed again, and the enchanting vision disappeared. But for a long time I dreamed on till my eyes fell on the instruments hanging in the partition. The compass still showed the course to be E and E. The manometer indicated a pressure of 5 atmospheres, equivalent to a depth of 25 fathoms, and the electric log gave a speed of 15 miles an hour. I expected Captain Nemo, but he did not appear. The clock marked the hour of 5. Ned Land and Council returned to their cabin, and I retired to my chamber. My dinner was ready. It was composed of turtle soup made of the most delicate hawkbills of a surmullet, served with puff paste, the liver of which, prepared by itself, was most delicious, and the fillet of Emperor Holonuthus, the savor of which seemed to me superior even to salmon. I passed the evening reading, writing, and thinking. Then sleep overpowered me, and I stretched myself on my couch and slept profoundly while the Nautilus was gliding rapidly through the current of the Black River. Chapter 14. A Note of Invitation. The next day was the 9th of November. I awoke after a long sleep of 12 hours. Council came, according to custom, to know how had I passed the night, and to offer his services. He had left his friend, the Canadian, sleeping like a man who had never done anything else all his life. I let the worthy fellow chatter as he pleased, without caring to answer him. I was preoccupied by the absence of the captain during our sitting of the day before, and hoping to see him today. And soon I was dressed, and as soon as I was dressed, I went into the saloon. It was deserted. I plunged into the study of the chronological treasures hidden behind glasses. I reveled also in great herbals filled with the rarest marine plants, which, although dried up, retained their lovely colors. Among these precious hydrophytes, I remarked some vorticile pavonaire, delicate ceramics with scarlet tints, some fan-shaped agari, and some natabuli, like flat mushrooms, which at one time used to be classed as zoophytes. In short, a perfect series of algae. The whole day passed without my being honored by a visit from Captain Nemo. The panels of the saloon did not open. Perhaps they did not wish for us to tire of these beautiful things. The course of the Nautilus was E&E, her speed 12 knots, the depth below the surface between 25 and 30 fathoms. The next day, 10th of November, the same desertation, the same solitude. I did not see one of the ship's crew. Ned and Council spent their greater part of their day with me. They were astonished at the inexplicable absence of the captain. Was this singular man ill? Had he altered his intentions with regard to us? After all, as Council said, we enjoyed perfect liberty. We were delicately and abundantly fed. Our host kept us in terms of his treaty. We could not complain, and, indeed, the singularity of our fate reserved such wonderful compensation for us that we had no right to accuse it as of yet. That day I commenced the journal of the adventures, which has enabled me to relate them with more scrupulous exactitude and minute detail. I wrote it on paper made from the Zostra Marina. November 11th, early in the morning, the fresh air spreading over the interior of the Nautilus told me that we had come to the surface of the ocean to renew our supply of oxygen. I directed my steps to the central staircase and mounted the platform. It was 6 o'clock. The weather was cloudy, the sea gray but calm, scarcely a billow. Captain Nemo, whom I hoped to meet, would be there. I saw no one but the steersman imprisoned in his glass cage, seated upon the projection formed by the hull of the pinnace. I inhaled the salt breeze with delight. By degrees the fog disappeared under the action of the sun's rays, and the radiant orb rose from behind the eastern horizon. The sea flamed under its glance like a train of gunpowder. The clouds scattered in the heights were colored with lively tints of beautiful shades and numerous mares' tails, which betokened wind for that day. But what was the wind to this Nautilus, which tempests could not frighten? I was admiring this joyous rising of the sun, so gay and so life-giving, when I heard steps approaching the platform. I was prepared to salute Captain Nemo, but it was his second, whom I had already seen on the captain's first visit, who appeared. He advanced on the platform, not seeming to see me. With his powerful glass to his eye, he scanned every point of the horizon. With great attention, this examination over, he approached the panel and pronounced a sentence in exactly these terms. I have remembered it, for every morning it was repeated under exactly the same conditions. It was thus worded: Notrun respok loreni virch. What it meant I could not say. These words pronounced, the second descended. I thought the Nautilus was about to return to its submarine navigation. I regained the panel and returned to my chamber. 5 days' speed, thus, without any change in our situation. Every morning I mounted the platform. The same phrase was pronounced by the same individual, but Captain Nemo did not appear. I had made my mind that I should never see him again, when on the 16th November, on returning to my room with Ned and Council, I found upon my table a note addressed to me. I opened it immediately. It was written in a bold, clear hand. The characteristics rather pointed, recalling the German type. The note was worded as follows: 16th of November, 1867. To Professor Arnon, on board the Nautilus. Captain Nemo invites Professor Arnon to a hunting party which will take place tomorrow morning in the forests of the island of Crespo. He hopes that nothing will prevent the professor from being present, and he will with pleasure see him joined by his companions. Captain Nemo, commander of the Nautilus. A hunt! Exclaimed Ned. And in the forest of the island of Crespo, added Council. "Oh, then the gentleman is going on terra firma," replied Ned Land. "That seems to me to be clearly indicated," said I, reading the letter once more. "Well, we must accept," said the Canadian, "but once more on dry ground we shall know what to do. Indeed, I shall not be sorry to eat a piece of fresh venison." Without seeking to reconcile what was contradictory between Captain Nemo's manifest aversion to islands and continents and his invitation to hunt in a forest, I contented myself with replying, "Let us first see where the island of Crespo is." I consulted the planisphere, and in 32 degrees 40 north latitude and 157 degrees 50 west longitude, I found a small island recognized in 1801 by Captain Crespo and marked in the ancient Spanish maps as Roca de la Plata, the meaning of which is the Silver Rock. We were then about 1,800 miles from our starting point, and the course of the Nautilus, a little changed, was bringing it back toward the southeast. I showed this little rock lost in the midst of the North Pacific to my companions. "If Captain Nemo does sometimes go on dry ground," said I, "he at least chooses desert islands." Ned Land shrugged his shoulders without speaking and counsel, and he left me. After supper, which was served by the steward, mute and impassible, I went to bed, not without some anxiety. The next morning, the 17th of November, on awakening, I felt that the Nautilus was perfectly still. I dressed quickly and entered the saloon. Captain Nemo was there waiting for me. He rose, bowed, and asked me if it was convenient for me to accompany him. As he made no allusion to his absence during the last 8 days, I did not mention it, and simply answered that my companions and myself were ready to follow him. We entered the dining room, where breakfast was served. "Monsieur Arnaud," said the captain, "pray share my breakfast without ceremony. We will chat as we eat. For though I promised you a walk in the forest, I did not undertake to find hotels there. So breakfast as a man who will most likely not have his dinner till very late." I did honor to the repast. It was composed of several kinds of fish and slices of holothryte, excellent zoophytes, and different sorts of seaweed. Our drink consisted of pure water, to which the captain added some drops of fermented liquor, extracted by the Kamschatka method from the seaweed, known under the name of Rhodymenia palmata. Captain Nemo ate the first without saying a word. Then he began. "Sir, when I proposed to you to hunt in my submarine forest of Crespo, you evidently thought me mad. Sir, you should never judge lightly of any man. But, Captain, believe me. Be kind enough to listen, and you will then see whether you have any cause to accuse me of folly and contradiction." I listen. "You know as well as I do, Professor, that man can live under water, providing he carries with him the sufficient supply of breathable air. In submarine works, the workman clad in an impervious dress, with his head in metal helmet, receives air from above by means of forcing pumps and regulators." "That is a diving apparatus," said I. "Just so. But under these conditions, the man is not at liberty. He is attached to the pump which sends him air through the india rubber hose, and if we were obliged to be thus held to the Nautilus, we could not go far." "And the means of getting free?" I asked. "It is of no use. It is to use the Recoil Apparatus, invented by 2 of your own countrymen, which I have brought to perfection for my own use, and which will allow you to risk yourself under these new physiological conditions without any organ whatever suffering. It consists of a reservoir of thick iron plates, in which I store the air under pressure of 50 atmospheres. This reservoir is fixed on the back by means of braces like a soldier's knapsack. Its upper part forms a box in which the air is kept by means of a bellows, and therefore cannot escape unless it's in normal tension, and therefore, unless it is in normal tension. In the Recoil apparatus, such as we use, two India rubber pipes leave this box and join a sort of tent which holds the nose and mouth. One is to introduce fresh air, the other is to let out foul, and the tongue closes one or the other according to the wants of the respirator. But I, in encountering great pressures at the bottom of the sea, was obliged to shut my head, like that of a diver, in a ball of copper. And it is this ball of copper that two pipes, the inspirator and the expirator, open. Perfectly, Captain Nemo, but the air that you carry with you must soon be used. When it only contains 15% of oxygen, it is no longer fit to breathe. Right, but I told you, Monsieur Arnaud, that the pumps of the Nautilus allow me to store the air under considerable pressure, and on those conditions, the reservoir of the apparatus can furnish breathable air for 9 or 10 hours. I have no further objections to make, I answered. I will only ask you one thing, Captain. How can you light your road at the bottom of the seas? With the Rumkorov apparatus, Monsieur Arnaud. One is carried on the back, the other is fastened to the waist. It is composed of the Bunsen pile, which I do not work with bichromate of potash, but with sodium. A wire was introduced which collects the electricity produced and directs it toward the particularly made lantern. In this lantern is a spiral glass which contains a small quantity of carbonic gas. When the apparatus is at work, this gas becomes luminous, giving out a white and continuous light. Thus provided, I can breathe and I can see. Captain Nemo, to all my objections you make such crushing answers that I dare no longer doubt. But if I am forced to admit the Recoil and the Rumkorff apparatus, I must be allowed some reservations with regard to the gun I am to carry. But it's not a gun for powder, answered the captain. Then it is an air gun? Doubtless. How would you have me manufacture gunpowder on board without either saltpeter, sulfur, or charcoal? Besides, I added, to fire under water in a medium 850 times denser than air, we must conquer very considerable resistance. That would be no difficulty. There exist guns, according to Fulton, perfected in England by Philip Coles, and Burley in France by Fursey, and in Italy by Landi, which are furnished with a peculiar system of closing, which can fire under these conditions. But I repeat, having no powder, I use air under great pressure, which the pumps of the Nautilus furnish abundantly. But this air must be rapidly used. Well, have I not my Recoil reservoir, which can be furnish that at need? A tap is all that is required. Besides, Monsieur Arnaud, you must see yourself that during our submarine hunt you can spend but little air and but few balls. But it seems to me that in this twilight and in the midst of this fluid, which is very dense compared with the atmosphere, shots could not go far, nor easily prove mortal, sir. On the contrary, with this gun, every blow is mortal, and however lightly the animal is touched, it falls as if struck by a thunderbolt. Why? Because the balls sent by this gun are not ordinary balls, but little cases of glass invented by Lenny Borick, an Austrian chemist, of which I have a large supply. These glass cases are covered with a case of steel and weighted with a pellet of lead. They are real Leyden bottles, into which the electricity is forced to a very high tension. With the slightest shock, they are discharged, and the animal, however strong it may be, falls dead. I must tell you that these cases are size number 4, and that the charge for an ordinary gun would be a 10. I will argue no longer, I replied, rising from the table. I have nothing left me but to take my gun. At all events, I will go where you go. Captain Nemo then led me aft, and in the passing before Ned and Council's cabin, I called my two companions, who followed immediately. We then came to a kind of cell near the machinery room, in which we were put on our walking dress. Oh, let's see. We only have 5 more minutes of the hour left. Oh, it's a short chapter. Chapter 15. A Walk on the Bottom of the Sea. This cell was, to speak correctly, the arsenal and wardrobe of the Nautilus. A dozen diving apparatus hung from the partition waiting for our use. Ned Land, on seeing them, showed evident repugnance to dress himself in one. But my worthy Ned, the forests of the island of Crespo are nothing but submarine forests. Good, said the disappointed harpooner, who saw his dreams of fresh meat fade away. And you, Monsieur Arnaud, are you going to dress yourself in those clothes? There is no alternative, Master Ned. As you please, sir, replied the harpooner, shrugging his shoulders. But as for me, unless I am forced, I will never get into one. No one will force you, Master Ned, said Captain Nemo. Is Council going to risk it? Asked Ned. I follow my master wherever he goes, replied Council. At the captain's call, two of the ship's crew came to help us to dress in the heavy and impervious clothes made of India rubber without seam, and constructed expressly to resist considerable pressure. One would have thought it was a suit of armor, both supple and resisting. The suit formed trousers and waistcoat, and the trousers were finished off with thick boots, weighted with heavy laden soles. The texture of the waistcoat was held together by bands of copper, which crossed the chest, protecting it from the great pressure of the water, leaving the lungs free to act. Sleeves ended in gloves, which in no way restrained the movement of the hands. There was a vast difference noticeable between these consummate apparatus and the old cork breastplates, jackets, and other contrivances that were in vogue during the 18th century. Captain Nemo had one of his companions, a sort of Hercules, who must have possessed great strength. Council and myself were soon enveloped in the dresses. There remained nothing more to be done but to enclose our heads in a metal box. But before proceeding to this operation, I asked the captain's permission to examine the guns we were to carry. One of the Nautilus's men gave me a simple gun, the butt end of which, made of steel hollow, in the center was rather large. It served as a reservoir for compressed air, which a valve worked by a spring allowed to escape into a metal tube. A box of projectiles and a groove in which the thickness of the butt end contained about 20 of these electric balls, which by means of a spring were forced into the barrel of the gun. As soon as one shot was fired, another was ready. Captain Nemo, said I, this arm is perfect and easily handled. I only ask to be allowed to try it, but how shall I gain the bottom of the sea? At this moment, Professor, the Nautilus is stranded in 5 fathoms, and we have nothing to do but to start. But how shall we get off? You shall see. Captain Nemo thrust his head into the helmet. Council and I did the same, not without hearing an ironical good sport from the Canadian. The upper part, ironical, good sport from the Canadian. The upper part of our dress terminated in copper collar, upon which was screwed the metal helmet. 3 holes, protected by thick glass, allowed us to see all the directions. By simply turning our heads in the interior of the headdress, as soon as it was in position, the Recoil apparatus on our backs began to act, and, for my part, I could breathe with ease. With the Ruhmkorff lamp hanging from my belt and the gun in my hand, I was ready to set out. But to speak the truth, Imprisoned in these heavy garments and glued to the deck by my leaden soles, it was impossible for me to take a step. But this state of things was provided for. I felt myself being pushed into a little room contiguous to the wardrobe room. My companions followed, towed along in the same way. I heard a watertight door, furnished with stopper plates, close upon us, and we were wrapped in profound darkness. After some minutes, a loud hissing was heard. I felt the cold mount of my feet to my chest. Evidently, from some part of the vessel, they had means of tap given entrance to the water, which was invading us, and with which the room was soon filled. A second door, cut in the side of the Nautilus, then opened. We saw a faint light. In another instant, our feet trod the bottom of the sea. And now, how can I retrace the impression left upon me by the walk under the waters? Words are impotent to relate such wonders. Captain Nemo walked in front. His companion followed some steps behind. Counsel and I remained near each other, as if in an exchange of words had been possible through our metallic cases. I no longer felt the weight of my clothing or of my shoes, of my reservoir of air or my thick helmet, in the midst of which my head rattled like an almond in its shell. The light, which lit the soil 30 feet below the surface of the ocean, astonished me by its power. The solar rays shone through the watery mass easily and dissipated all color and clearly distinguished objects at the distance of 150 yards. Beyond that, tints darkened into fine gradations of ultramarine and faded into vague obscurity. Truly, this water which surrounded me was but another air, denser than the terrestrial atmosphere, but almost as transparent. Above me was the calm surface of the sea. We were walking on fine, even sand, not wrinkled as on flat shore, which retains the impressions of the billows. This dazzling carpet, really a reflector, repelled the rays of the sun with wonderful intensity, which accounted for the vibration which penetrated every atom of liquid. Shall I be believed when I say that the depth of 30 feet I could see as if I were in broad daylight? For a quarter of an hour I trod on the sand, sown with the imperishable dust of shells. The hull of the Nautilus, resembling a long shoal, disappeared by degrees, but its lantern, when darkness should overtake us in the waters, would help us to guide us on board by its distinct rays. Soon, forms of objects outlined in the distance were discernible. I recognized magnificent rocks hung with tapestry of zoophytes of the most beautiful kind, and I was at first struck by the peculiar effect of this medium. It was then 10 in the morning. The rays of the sun struck the surface of the waves at rather an oblique angle, and at the touch of their light, decomposed by refraction as though a prism, flowers, rocks, plants, shells, and polypi were shaded at the edges by 7 solar colors. It was a feast for the eyes, these complication of colored tints, the perfect kaleidoscope of green, yellow, orange, violet, indigo, and blue. In one word, the whole palette, an enthusiastic colorist. Why could I not communicate to Counsel the lively sensations which were mounting to my brain, and rival him in expression of admiration? For aught I knew, Captain Nemo and his companion might be able to exchange thoughts by means of signs previously agreed upon. So for went better. So for want of better, I talked to myself. I declaimed in the copper box which covered my head, thereby expanding more air and vain words than was perhaps expedient. Various kinds of isis, clusters of pure tuft coral, prickly fungi, and anemones formed a brilliant garden of flowers enameled with porphyrite, decked with their collarets of blue tentacles, sea stars studding the sandy bottoms, together with astrophytons like fine lace embroidered by the hands of maids, whose festoons were waved by the gentle undulations caused by our walk. This was a real grief to me to crush under my feet the brilliant specimens of mollusks which strewed the ground by thousands, of hammerheads, donaceae, vertebrae bounding shells, the staircases and the red helmet shells, the angel wings, and many other produced by this inexhaustible ocean. But we were bound to walk, so we went on, while above our heads waved shoals of phyalides, leaving their tentacles to float in the train, medusae, whose umbrellas of opal or rose pink, escalloped with a band of blue, sheltered us from the rays of the sun, and the fiery plague which in the darkness would have strewn our path with phosphorescent light. All these wonders I saw in the space of a quarter of a mile, scarcely stopping and following Captain Nemo, who beckoned me on by signs. Soon the nature of the soil changed. To the sandy plain succeeded an extent of slimy mud, which the Americans call ooze, composed of equal parts of siliceous and calcareous shells. We then traveled over a plain of seaweed, of wild and luxuriant vegetation. This sward was of close texture and soft to the feet, and rivaled the softest carpet woven by the hand of man. But while verdure was spread at our feet, it did not abandon our heads. A light network of marine plants, of that inexhaustible family of seaweeds, of which more than 2,000 kinds are known, grew on the surface of the Arctic. Grew on the surface of the water. I saw long ribbons of fucus floating, some globular, others tuberous, of most delicate foliage, and some rhododendron palmate resembling the fan of a cactus. I noticed that the green plants kept nearer to the top of the sea, while the red were the greatest depth, leaving to the black or brown hydrophytes the care of forming gardens and the parterres in the remote beds of the ocean. We had quitted the Nautilus about an hour and a half. It was near noon. I knew by the perpendicularity of the sun's rays, which were no longer refracted. The magical colors disappeared by degrees, and the shades of emerald and sapphire were effaced. We walked with regular steps which rang upon the ground with astonishing intensity. The slightest noise was transmitted with a quickness to which the ear, unaccustomed on earth, indeed, water is a better conductor of sound than air, in the ratio of 4 to 1. At this period, the earth sloped downward. The light took a uniform tint. We were at a depth of 105 yards and 20 inches, undergoing a pressure of 6 atmospheres. At this depth, I could still see the rays of the sun, though feebly. To their intense brilliancy had succeeded a reddish twilight, a lowest state between day and night, but we could still see well enough. It was not necessary to resort to Recoil Apparatus as of yet. At this moment, Captain Nemo stopped. He waited till I joined him, and then pointed to an obscure mass looming in the shadow at a short distance. It is the forest of the island of Crespo, thought I, and I was not mistaken. And that, my darlings, is where we leave you for the evening. Thank you, everyone, for all of the lovely comments, all the shares, all the likes. Thank you for all of my supporters who keep the channel going. I appreciate you deeply. With that, I bid you good night. Take care, my lovelies.